Well, hello, hello. Hello, hello. How are you guys doing this evening?
I'm
Good.
well.
Like, wait a minute, are you guys out there? Hello, knock, knock, knock.
I thought you
Hello.
were talking to the crowd.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Right.
I will now. Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome to the to the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat here at Bruce's Bees this evening. Going to host here at Bruce's Bees. We got Brian on here from Castle Hives, and tonight we have Mike Berry visiting with us. He's kind of filling in for Greg a little bit. Greg is out of pocket this evening, so if Greg decides to hop on later, he may, but I kind of doubt it. I think he's got something else going on. So welcome aboard, everybody. And I noticed we had, I think before we ever started, we had like, 45, 50 people in here, something like that. And, I see some of the regulars. We got Grayson in here, Kevin from Bees in the Abyss, Gary Stewart, Michael, 21st B. We got Eric, Spirit of Toad, Dustin is here, Dwayne, Keith Spillman's in here, Dodd House is in here. And just so many people. Spencer Cox, Loma Vista is in here. Probably going to miss somebody. Foster Hensel's in here. Chris from Bees, Nuts, and Honey is in here. Lisa Grammy's in here. Cedar Ridge Bees. David Brown. David Brown is from down around the Bay Minette Mobile area, but he's in here. Looks like he's over in Mississippi now. So welcome, David, in here. Greg Strama. Eric. I can't keep up with everybody. So Flash C4. Paul Hill Hives is in here. Dominican Beekeeper. Hello, Dominican. He's a common regular on the channel here. Russell Koopman. Eric. Anyway, we got so many people in here, I kind of lost track. But welcome aboard, everybody, tonight. We missed last week. We apologize for that. It just didn't work out for us last week. Everybody kind of had some things going on, Brian and Greg, and I didn't want to do it myself, and so we just took the night off. And but here we are. We're back tonight, so I look forward to a fun and hopefully informative and beekeeping chat opportunity to fellowship with you two and also with everyone in the chat tonight. So, Brian, I guess we'll start off with you, man. Tell us what's going on. I know you've been real busy up there in Ohio, up in Northeast Ohio there.
Yeah. As far as the bees, they're good. I went over, oh gosh, I don't even know what day. I went over 2 days last week and went through all the colonies just to check. They've got the story and a half, a deep and a medium. And the girls did not want to store anything in the supers that I put on. Out of all the supers that I put out, I've got 2 boxes that I've got to harvest. So I'll probably get like a bucket of fall honey. But other than that, the boxes are heavy. They packed it out to the point where like I'm sitting there scratching my head thinking I got a little bit of time before I got to worry about feed, because some of the mediums that are on, they're edge to edge packed. And it's like, well, I don't want to throw a whole ton of feed on them right now, because then they're going to, I just don't want to run into any issues with them backfilling too fast, things like that. So they look good. I've only got one colony that looks small that I probably will just let it go and let it run its course, and it'll just die. It's a swarm that I caught, and they requeen themselves very late. So they don't have adequate brood in them. They're just population wise, they're just not there. So I'm pretty much just going to accept that one will go. But all the other 17, they're good. I go over and lift them. My last video, I mean, there were some of the boxes I lifted where I'm doing the old them boxes are getting too heavy to lift.
Yeah, that's a good thing though.
It is, yeah. And once I get world famous, like some beekeepers out there, I can get them fancy lifts and things like that so that I don't have to lift boxes. But I'm not quite to that level yet. So, but no, they look good. I mean, I'm content with them. I'm going to get some treatments on them. I almost pulled the trigger and bought some of that new Naroa that's out there, but it's a syrup. And once I looked at it, it's a syrup that's fed, and then they consume it. They pack it into the cells, and then when the bees consume it, they consume the product that then when the varroa feed on them, it stops their reproduction. And like tonight and tomorrow, we've got frost. So I'm not wanting to put syrup packets in my hives that are good for 18 weeks when
Mhm.
in probably another 6 or so weeks, it's going to be freezing.
Yeah.
So I'll just do other treatments, but they're doing good. They're doing good. I can't complain. So
Sounds great. Mike, how about you?
Oh man, I'm just kind of relaxing right now. This is my time to relax. I got everybody pretty much set. Just honestly, I'm picking up anybody that just didn't make it, and dealing with a couple weak colonies. Um, they look fine. I mean, I don't go into fall with huge hives. I kind of, you know, I'm on the Bob Benny side on that, where he talks about not having gigantic hives in the fall. It's for me, it's less maintenance. It's easier to manage in the spring. But as far as weight and food right now, I guess the same as y'all, Bruce. Our goldenrod is blowing up, but I don't know how much nectar is coming off of it. I'm not smelling it in the hives that much. A lot of pollen coming in, but I won't worry about. I won't worry right now about checking weights until probably another 3 weeks when the goldenrod's finally done. I'll go through weigh everybody, and I'll back feed anybody. I'm gonna do a little open feeding, I think, though, with some Hive Alive, just to
Mhm.
kind of your same thing, where you kind of, that 1 yard where you put them off by the trees. Kind of gonna do the same thing you do with that, where I'm
Yeah.
gonna load in some heavy syrup. I might even go light syrup, to be honest with you, because down here I just don't. I don't know. I got some of that feed from Hilco left over, and it's so easy to mix up and double a bucket on yourself that I just don't feel like we needed that 2-to-1 that much. So I'm going to throw a bunch of Hive Alive in, kind of get that on board, um, and try and just get them set up. I did just OAV this year. I didn't go thymol this year, which is I don't know. I did that for a few years, and now I've gotten back to just OAV. Now I got a battery operated vaporizer, so that's done. Dealing with a few dead outs, and that's really it right now. And trying to requeen one that kind of like that one you had, Bruce. I mean, Brian, that just requeened late, and I don't know. I'm over that, but that's really all I'm doing. Weather's turning nice. We're happy.
Let me turn my mic back on here. I got something in my throat tonight, and I'm not sure what that is. But yeah, down here, it's we were real dry up until just a couple of weeks ago, and we've had a couple of nice rains since then. And I was in my bee yard this past weekend, I think, and you can start to smell that fall flow kicking in a little bit, and in Sloke in particular, I could smell it. I personally, some people compare it to like dirty gym socks. It doesn't smell that. It doesn't smell like that to me. I kind of, it doesn't bother me. I kind of like the smell. Maybe it's just because it smells like they're having success. I'm not sure, but to me, it's not kind of not the pleasant smell that you get in the spring and summer honey, but it is. It doesn't bother me like it does some others. It is definitely it's a unique and a significant smell. It's different than everything else though, but. Yeah, I almost got in trouble with some of mine because I did some summer splits in July and August, which is really difficult for success. But I did a little better job this year, especially with some queens that I got from Greg in August of actually feeding them when I made the splits. And overall, they're doing pretty well. The acceptance rate has been much better than usual on those. Greg is doing he's doing a study with them, and I'm not sure of all the details on it. Don't want to know all the details on it because it's supposed to be kind of one group. I got 20 queens, 10 or the control group, 10 or the test he's doing, and I don't know which ones are which. I want to keep myself as neutral as possible on that, so I don't, so there's no bias in there, and so, but it's kind of cool. I 18 of the 20 queens last time I checked, I believe, are alive in the colonies. A couple of them are pretty weak. I think it was just because of the way I made the splits. But overall, compared to how my splits normally go in the summertime here, so far they seem to be doing better than usual by far. And I do attribute a lot of that to the fact that I made the splits fairly strong, and then I have bucket feeders on them on the new queens, and I think that helped have that trickle coming in. But I've also put some open feed out to them, and where we've got the goldenrod blooming, I can smell it coming in. the different yards. And so I'm not really feeding them actively. I've got a little bit of feed left I may put out to them so it doesn't go bad. But, I plan to kind of, let's get into the topic of tonight, fall beekeeping, preparing our winter bees or whatever. But I'm kind of getting them through this little patch right here, and then I'll start putting the Hive Alive fondant in them when it starts to cool down a little bit. And that worked well for me last year. But as far as videos go, I had a video that I filmed, I think it was September 13th, which has been, a few weeks back now. And I was working on it, trying to get it edited. I've been really behind. And I did some mite checks. I wanted to show how the mite situation was down here. And, and the main colony I spent the most time in, went through the colony, did a inspection, took the mite sample. And, first of all, I was trying to show me, stirring the bees up with the mite, check the mites. And I just had the very bottom of the cup in there. And then I turned the camera off. I'm like, I'll put this hive back together. Then we'll come back and see what the count was. And, sure enough, I forgot I think I hit stop. I'd been recording walking over to it, and I hit stop when I meant to record. So I didn't get the results. And so that video it's out of there. I'm not I don't have any, the whole purpose of the video is not possible because I eliminated the clip where, all this time I spent doing that inspection. Then I just didn't have the video of the actual clip that I wanted. The culmination of the whole video wasn't there. It did not exist. You guys have never done that, I don't imagine. You've never hit play when you meant to hit stop, or stop when you meant to hit play.
More times than you can count. Frustrating too, because you're like, oh my God, you can't go back and do it over. You just can't.
No, and sometimes if you do several colonies, you can mix and match. But I didn't have anything that could, I didn't have any way to go around that. So, but as far as the channel goes, I haven't done a lot lately. I've mentioned this previously. I'm kind of rethinking my channel a little bit, and kind of just stepping back a little bit and taking a look. I'm going to try and clean some things up and maybe try a little bit of a different approach. Still some of the same things, but try and streamline things a little bit. And I don't know. I've been kind of pulled. My heart's been pulled a little bit to do things a little bit differently. So I'm taking a little bit of time to figure some of that out. I may have a video here or there, but not at the frequency I've been doing them. There's some things I need to work on and get cleaned up with it. So we'll see what happens. And I may do a video explaining that here soon. I'm not sure, but down here, we're kind of in a holding pattern. I do have I've got 3 different instant vapes now. I actually have 4, but 3 of them that I use. I've got the original instant vape, before it even had the battery, what do they call that? The protection on it for the batteries. And so I think I killed some batteries using that thing. I've got that original one, which was awesome. It's a great product. And then I got the compact, which I like even more. And then now I have a turbo, which it looks just like the compact, but it is like way faster than the other 2. And so I treated all my colonies with oxalic acid vapor the last 2 weekends. I did have, spoiler alert, I did have quite a fair number of mites in my colonies when I did the checks. And so I'm just hitting them hard with OAV. I too, Mike, I'm not doing the thymol this year. I'm just hitting them hard with OAV now, like really hammering them hard. I'm going 4 grams per box, which is a little more than what you called for. A lot of people can't believe I'm doing more than 4 grams total, but if I got 2 boxes, I'm doing 8 grams. I'm just hitting them hard. It's not going to hurt the bees, and it may not be a benefit really, but it can't hurt the bees. And so I'm just hitting them hard right now. The last 2 weeks, I may back off to 4 grams from here on out, but I've got 3 to 4 more treatments I'm going to do on them, and then check them and see what the results are. Probably end of October, see how it's going, or early November. And then I'll give them a few weeks break and then probably hit them again over winter time. But with these 3 oxalic acid vaporizers I spent a lot of money on batteries. And so I've got enough batteries now to go through my entire operation. I did my entire operation at 4 grams per box this past weekend and didn't have to recharge any batteries. So I've got probably as much more money in the batteries as I do in the vaporizers. But now I think I'm set to, and I got a fast charger. You can do 4 batteries at once. And so I went a little crazy and spent some money on that. But the bees have been good to me. We had a record year, and so I was able to have a little bit of money to spend, and now we should be set to do all to oxalic acid vaporize until I'm happy, until the bees are, we'll see how it works. But that's what I've been doing, and they're kind of in a holding pattern. I don't like to get in them too much right now. There's not a whole lot of bee work to do, kind of like I think you guys would agree with that. And just going to I've got to get my bee yards cleaned up a little bit. I've got some old boxes laying around that I need to get kind of cleaned up and cleaned out of there. But just it's not the amount of bee work now that it normally is. Kind of like you said, Mike, we're in a little bit of a holding pattern right now. So
Yeah.
that's what we're doing down here.
I need to get one day when we break 70, the next few days, like our high is going to be 60, 62-ish. And I've got those 2 supers that I need to extract, but I just am not even going to touch them when it gets cool like that. I need a day where we're close to 70, and then I'm going to get that squared away and get all that equipment cleaned up and wrapped up for the season. But yeah, I've had so much going on that I'm kind of behind as far as getting that work done. So,
well, years ago, that's all I did, and I did OAV before OAV was legal. I got a burner from a old boy up north, and he sent it to me, and I used to do it. And what I would do is every fall I would do 5 treatments, or 4. I started doing 5 when I got my Provat because it was easier. And when I started getting over 40 colonies, I was like, and this is while I was still working. I said, this is too much after work every day, on and on. And that's when I started going to organic compounds. And of course, I tried HopGuard, which is more, natural as well. HopGuard will work, but it's very messy. The bees hate it, and you got to use so much of it that's super expensive. So I ended up settling on the thymol. It's an easy treatment. It's not hard. And I know it's hot down here, but if you do it right, I go with Greg Rogers. I sat at lunch with him at North Carolina when I was up there speaking, and he really talked some good sense into me about the thymol. And I really liked it and all, but this year I just missed the train on it. And I sat right there at the Louisiana convention. I was helping Hilco out. They had it on sale. And I don't know what I meant to get some before Jennifer got out the door, and she didn't. And I said, you know what? It's just too late. So I went back to the old OAV. And I mean, I was running 10 to 30% loss, give or take, each year, depending on what, using OAV in the fall. And it worked. I mean, and okay, so maybe I was getting a little better success out of Apiguard, but in the end, I feel like a 10 to 30% loss between that somewhere is not the end of the world each year, because that's what guys are getting when they were throwing Amatraz in there for the most part. I mean, they were getting between 10 and 30 if you talk to the commercial beekeepers. So I don't know. I just went back to it. I like the thymol. I think it works. I did mite counts before and after, and it does knock them down. And I do so much want to get on the formic train. But man, I got to do that in the spring. That's a scary thing to try and do in the fall. And I know Greg always says, well, it's going to take out your weak queens anyway. You didn't need them anyhow. Well, I need any queen for winter. I don't care if she can get me through winter. I can deal with her in the spring. So no, and he has a good regiment. So in his y'all seasons up there, Brian, are so much different. So he's got a good regiment, and he's got queens. Like he's got mating standing by, where he can go grab them if week one does go. I can't. So I totally understand what he's getting at, and I agree with him 100%. But for mine, I can't. But that formic, they talk about that stuff, and yeah, I'd love to get on that in the spring. Or I might just do the sponges, the new Nora. We had a good discussion at the meeting with Dr. Harris the other night, and I'm kind of on his side on that. I'm going to wait and see. RNAi, the RNA interceptors have been messed with in the bees. It's been talked about for years. The one study they did, what he was talking about, and I got it. It's on my phone. I could look it up, but he emailed me and explained it a little more. But they did it, and it's kind of like the probiotic thing. I do the probiotics right now because it feels good, and I also bought $1,000 worth. So what else am I going to do with it? But it worked. The old RNAi stuff they did for the bee side of it worked great in the lab, but when they got it out in the field, it wasn't panning out. So I want to see what this stuff does. I sure hope it does good, because it's some cool research if you look it up. But man, it really is. It's neat, but how's it going to do in the field en masse when you're putting it on 60 or 70 hives? That's what I want to see. But yeah, the OAV is going to have to be it for me for right now. Unless I can get the guts to throw some formic on kind of like you did, Bruce, when the guy came down with you, and that's the video that really, your video on that when he came and did it with you, and then I talked to Alan from Rossman, and that's all he uses in Georgia. He won't use anything else anymore. He uses it when it's hot, and he just goes one pad when it's hot, throws it on, and he said, man, he'll never go back now. So it's man, I think it's a good treatment, and I think it's a good thing, but that's not to get off on a sidetrack on treatment. I want to do
No,
that,
that's important. That's what we're talking about.
So
yeah, I used the Formic a couple times, and it seemed to work okay. The first time I used it, it knocked the mites down quite a bit. Second time I used it was actually in the fall, maybe that same year, and it worked okay. But at some colonies, it didn't knock them back like I thought it would. And I used 2 pads every time I did it. And so it was kind of weird. I didn't have the huge queen loss that a lot of people talk about. I'm sure I lost a few, but if you do it in the spring, they're going to probably requeen, but you may not even know about it. They're going to go ahead and requeen. And what I found out when I used the Formic was, and there's kind of a similar situation with the Thymol, is that it kind of just destroys the brood a little bit. The queen quits laying. And with the Formic, it actually, it almost burns the brood. It seems like there's no brood in there hardly. But then they come back, like the queen comes back laying with a vengeance. A good queen will just, and there were some colonies that were kind of spotty brood pattern, if I remember right. It's been a couple of years since I did it. And after the Formic, like the queen came back in just a beautiful brood pattern. So it's almost like it caused some of the colonies to reset. Some of them, it didn't even slow down a whole lot. And some of them, she completely stopped. But it wasn't a horrible treatment. But then you hear the horror stories of people that lose every colony they put it in. And so I don't know, that say they do it by the directions. And so I don't know. It is kind of a scary treatment, but I think, in my opinion, down here, it's a less risky treatment in the spring because you have, the bees can requeen and they can do all that. There's drones and everything around. Whereas in the fall, you lose a queen, you're combining the colony because they just don't have time really to start back at the beginning and make a emergency queen. I mean, if you put a cell in there or even a mated queen, it would work, but it's hard to get mated queens as well. So it's way more risky, I think, in the fall than it is in the spring down here where it's so hot. But I think, go ahead.
It works though. I was going to say, it works. The guy, like when he explained it to you on your video, it's when I talk to the people that do use it successfully, they're following the directions 100%, and they're using it with the right temperature variances. And it does spectacular for them. So, yeah, they may have some losses, but I'm talking about a guy in Texas treating 150 hives with this stuff. Greg talks great about it. That guy in your video Alan, everybody I'm talking to really talks good about it.
John has a comment here. John Lawler, he says, long lasting up to 18 weeks, maintain less than 3 mites per 100 bees threshold for up to 18 weeks in field trials conducted by experienced commercial beekeepers. Is he talking about the Naroa, or is he talking about something else? Okay.
Yeah, Naroa.
That's the mRNA treatment, right? Okay.
Yeah, RNAi. It's but for the mites though, the mRNA.
But
again, it's not a field. It's not a like it's in the field with them and their testing, but it hasn't. There's nothing out there yet. And not disputing what John's saying. I know John's smart. He's reading up on it, understand it. But what I mean is they're not out there in the operations yet. We need to see it in there. I know they've tested it in some operations, but I'm hoping it's great. I just want to sit back and watch.
Yeah, I kind of had an experience. I did the Veroxan this year in the spring and in the summer, and I'd never used it before, but I put it in all my colonies. That's really been my treatment, Pat. That's been my treatment this year. I didn't use anything else. Last year I used, in the summertime, I used Apivar, and that's been my go-to in the summer when we pull honey off, with tremendous success over the years. But last year there were a few colonies that were just mite bombs afterwards, like ridiculous numbers. Most of them were fine, like 0 to 1 to 2, but that's in a wash. But some of them, I had a few that were just off the chain. 2 of them were ridiculous numbers. Like, I'm almost embarrassed to say how many mites were in those washes. So this year I decided to stay away from that, and I tried the Veroxan in the spring. I did OAV last winter, and the bees were in good shape. I did the Veroxan in the spring. It was actually in March, and I didn't get that off until after we harvested honey in June. And so I left it on there too long, which I just think it loses its effectiveness. I think it just kind of goes dormant. I don't think bees are going to really grow resistance to oxalic acid. And so it didn't worry me too much. But when I did washes after the honey came off, there were some mites in there, but they were mostly within threshold. Most of them were pretty good. They weren't bad. Like, I was washing, 0 to 6, 7 mites, something like that. So I put another round of it on. I had a commercial beekeeper here, my buddy Tyler, who had a pallet of the stuff. I mean, that's a lot of roxanne, and that stuff is heavy. I can't, it's crazy. So I got the Man Lake pallet price, which was way cheaper, like a lot, significantly cheaper than if you buy it for full price. And I applied it to all my colonies again. I think the first weekend in July, it was July 3rd and 4th weekend, somewhere in there. And then when I pulled the strips out a few weeks ago, like I think 3 or 4 weeks ago now, when I pulled the strips out, a lot of the washes were okay, but I had some that were up in that over, 10, 15, 20 range, 22 range. Didn't have any like 70s, but I had some that were. So what I'm doing now, I'm just hitting them with OAV like crazy. I'm just going to hit them every week, 5, 6 weeks. And it doesn't take me long with my batteries with these 3 units I've got. I can get through them really fast. And that turbo unit, that thing is probably almost twice as fast as the regular units. It's super fast. Like you put it in there in like 15, 20 seconds, you got 4 grams in there. It seems like it's so fast, but it eats up the batteries faster because I guess it's got more, it's using more power. But so I'm just going to hit them hard. I can get all my yards done like in, 4 to 6 hours, probably maybe 7 hours. If I hit them with just 4 grams, I could go a lot faster than that, but I've been hitting them with more, 4 grams per box. And so doubles, that's 8. So it's taking me longer, but that's my strategy. I could put Apigard in there. I just didn't order it this year. And I really just want to see what happens doing this. I hope I'm not making a mistake, but we'll see.
I did it. I tell you, I did it successfully for years at 4 grams. I've always done 4 grams. I did 4 grams before they said 4 grams was okay.
Yeah.
And it's when I say that 10 to 30% loss, because it could be anything, but I remember being at the North Carolina conference, or I heard somebody from Georgia, maybe it's Georgia, saying it takes at least 9 rounds to really get ahead of them when you're doing the OAV. Now, the Apigard, that's some nice stuff, but what we forget about that sometimes, I think, is that we slow our queen down. We shut her down in most cases. So do you want to do that when she's making winter bees? Not really. The time to do it is in summer. But then you can't be like me and not feed them up some 1-to-1 because you really need to grow them after that. You surely don't want to really do it in the spring, except for maybe after you've done your splits for maybe some swarm control. And another thing with Apigard, like we have such a hot temperature, but at the same time, it can't be too cold to do Apigard. Like you have to have that minimum temperature, or it will not go through the hive activated the way it's supposed to. And I can't explain it in scientific terms, but I've read it and I've got it written down somewhere. But it's got to meet that minimum, but it can't go over the maximum, or you got to split the dosages. But it's got so many different variables with it. While it works great, it is such a time-sensitive thing for us in the South, and for those guys in the North going into fall. They got to be careful it's not too cool, or they're going to waste a pile of money throwing it in there. Because I just talked to a guy in North Mississippi, and he runs about 500 or 600 hives, and he sells nukes, and he said, he makes his own. Now, look, he buys thymol commercially. He buys a barrel of thymol, a drum, and he mixes this stuff, and he makes his own his own Apigard, and he has great success. He said he put it on too late this year when the temp mornings were going low, and he said the mites, it didn't affect the mites near as much. So, and the Viroxan, I did some counts, but then I texted Greg Rogers and said, all right, because I told him I was going to give him my results. And he told me, well, you kind of counted your results too early because all the brood really isn't in full production yet. But I did see a knockdown on him with the Viroxan. But what he and Dr. Tarpey found out was the extended release is really best when your mite load is in check. It's good at maintaining them and bringing them down. If they're already too high, the Viroxan, the towels, and all that, what they're seeing with their research is it's not helping. It may keep them at bay at say 40 on a count, but it won't bring them down below threshold from what they have found. Now that's what they found, so I don't know. So
that's kind of what I'm seeing. And Bob Benny recently did some research. He tested like hundreds of colonies. I don't know if you've seen his video.
Yeah,
but he started with zeros on all his, and then he did the study. And that's very interesting. You can watch the videos leading up to it where they were taking the washes and how they had everything prepped, and he explains it all. And then he sent his dad off to the University of Georgia, and they did some research on it. And then the most recent video that I saw of his, I think it was released this weekend, maybe, he's sitting down with the folks from Georgia, from the guy from Georgia, University of Georgia, and he's explaining all the results. They put in all kinds of, the scientists like that, they look at a lot of variables that Bob wasn't even probably thinking about.
Right.
Very interesting information, and it did, that they worked well. I think the most, and you could have to watch it. It's really laid out nicely in that video, but I think the most successful one was the towels, the homemade
Yep.
sponges, or whatever you call them, the homemade Swedish towels. But the thing is it was directly related to the amount of oxalic acid in the treatment. And so the strips, Roxanne strips, I think he said, have, I believe, 7 grams, and the Canadian strips had, I think, 12, and then the homemade ones, I think the way they prepared them, they had like 13.5 or 14 grams or something like that. But so that, then he said it was interesting, when you have to watch the video yourself, but the data is like that little difference between the Canadian and the homemade seemed like it was significant. So I don't know if it was so much the actual method of application as much as it was the amount of oxalic acid in the treatment. But
Well, I think
anyway,
you're able to get more in the sponge. You're able to mix your glycerin and your oxalic acid more in the sponge. And so, Greg Rogers worked with Dr. Tarpey on that too. And, he goes and tests with Bob Binney as well. And what Greg was telling me was they found that putting the 2 sponges, they did a bunch of hives with 2 sponges. Then they took those same 2 sponges on other hives and cut them in half. So they made 4 equally spaced on top of the first deep, and then put the second deep on. He said the one split up into 4s actually killed more mites than the ones with just 2. So there's so much out there with research that it can really blow your mind. And I feel like it's just, you got to watch everything and find what's working for you in your region, and then do it, make your decision, and roll with it. And if you take a loss, swallow it and go another year. And like Joey Rawls always says, do 3 years, figure it out. Because if you're changing every year, you don't know what worked. I don't care if you do mite counts or not. You don't know what worked. You have no trend data.
That's right.
True. Yeah, that's
man. True. Good stuff so far. We do have a lot of awesome folks in the chat right now. We got my computer says 113 folks. Maybe some more will hop on, maybe not. But we appreciate you guys all being here this evening and hanging out with us a little bit. And we've already kind of we've went ahead and dove into the mite talk. But Brian, I'd like to kind of shift over to you for a minute. As far as you're concerned, I know that obviously you've been tracking this on your channel, but the title is Fall Beekeeping Strategies tonight. So obviously fall beekeeping is preparation for winter. We begin that in different parts of the country. Probably when the honey comes off here, we're starting to prepare, like, July, August. It's time to start preparing for winter. Now we're heavy into that. It's almost too late in some areas to actually get started. Hopefully folks are well into that. If not, they need to get on it quick. So what are your strategies for winter preparation? What do you do in the fall, like leading up to this time right here? First of all, what are your main goals, and how do you achieve those goals?
Yeah, I mean, if you start out in the fall for your winter prep, up here, you're too late. Other areas of the country, you have a little bit more leeway. But like our temps, I was watching the news tonight, and they said our normal, if Mother Nature's being normal up here, the normal first frost is October 1st. So if you wait until it is technically considered fall to get into your winter prep, you are months late. What I've learned through the years, and it took a couple years of losing things, and then I'm scratching my head thinking, well, I started my winter prep in the fall, I don't know why it failed. I will start looking at winter things. Really, it's after I pull my supers, typically the first week of July. And you want to make sure your mites are taken care of. And I preach this to everybody just because you want your mites handled early, because you don't want sick bees raising up the bees that are going to raise your winter bees. So you want to go a couple brood cycles ahead of time just to make sure that everything is healthy. Weight wise up here, those that chase the fall flow, and I was guilty of it for years and years and years. I would chase that fall flow and then end up in a cycle where I am so late because, I was pulling supers in October, and then you're having to treat late. And you just get into this vicious cycle where the colonies are just not cleaned up. So I've learned through the years that I start my winter prep very early. It's still summertime, cleaning up those mites. You want to make sure the colonies have a decent size because truthfully up here, we've had like last year, and you even said it, you're like, I'm just amazed that anything lives up there when it's cold like that. But if you have decent sized, strong colonies and they have weight on them, toss 0 temps at them for a month. It's not going to bother them, But that's my main thing up here. It's, you got to start early and get them cleaned up, get that weight on them. But like my configuration, it's a little different. I've had people this year a couple times comment on my videos and they're like, oh, well, you got a super on there. You're treating them. You're doing this. My configuration now, it's that deep in the medium. There's times in the year where I don't have a queen excluder on, so the queen has full range of both those boxes. There's other times where I do have an excluder on, but that medium that is above my deep, I will never harvest that. So that is the box that I focus on, and I watch that box so that it gets packed out. And I had a couple other colonies this year that were performing really well. So I left an extra super on them at times, had extra frames that were dedicated for feed for the winter. But it's clean colonies and weight up here. And that is it. I've had, through the years, and I know, Mike, you've watched me through the years, I've wrapped and I've done this and that. And I bought a sewing machine to make my own wraps for my colonies. And my wife thought I was nuts. She's like, you bought a sewing machine? And I'm like, man, I'm going to wrap these bees and I'm going to do this and that. And you don't need it. You do not need it up here. Those strong colonies, and if they have the weight to get them through the winter, they are 100% fine.
See, you nailed it with that, man. You nailed it with that because that's the key. And we don't deal with it. Trust me, I know. But we do have our cold spells and we do have our time. And I will hear people down here when we'll get those big freezes that we get. We get them. We get them for a week. We go in the teens, and that's significant weather for anything down here. Because especially if we get snow, we're not used to it. And the funny thing is, you'll see people come back and say, "My bees froze. The cold killed them." And I'm like, No, it didn't. Your bees weren't healthy, or they weren't large enough. One or the other. And you nailed it when you said if your bees are clean and they got the food. And I would add healthy, which if they're big and they're clean, they probably
get a good
Then you can, like you said, you can. We see the guys in Canada do it, not the indoor guys, but they do it. And so the cold, the bees can fend off the cold. There was something going on. They either ran out of stores. Now I have seen where they have a lot of stores for you guys up north. They won't move. They'll stay in that spot. Now they can't get to something. That I've seen, but that goes back to it's a small colony, because if it's large enough, they'll cover enough of that food, and they'll pass it between the cluster. So it's you hit the nail on the head with that. Is you can throw all the cold you want at them, but if you got clean bees and good population with food, you're set. You can do it.
You're good. Yeah, and that's all I see. When I'll see February-ish or so up here, I'll see the pictures in the social media groups, and there will be in the Northeast Ohio, and then like Ohio beekeepers, people will post pictures, and it's like a softball size little cluster, and they're dead in there, and they're like they froze to death, and it's like, well, no, that colony was doomed in the fall.
That's right. That's right.
But like now, like the other day, like I was saying, there's one colony that I 100%. In January, I'm probably going to take a picture of that colony, and it's going to be about that big, and it'll be frozen on a frame. But I know that right now. My other colonies, when I open up the boxes and I look at them, there's bees across every frame. And it's like, you get those strong colonies like that, as long as they have that food, they're clean, they're good.
And that's true, because it, like down here, we can get away with that colony. I got one that I caught the other day.
Yeah.
I'll do it. I got a video on it. It literally won't cover one side of one frame. I think
Yeah.
it's gone from the dead out I had. But
Yeah.
a nuke down here or a small colony, our winter prep isn't winter prep. We just need to make sure they have food, and the same as you, they gotta have food, they gotta be healthy and clean. But we have so much longer to do it, and we don't like it's not as critical, I guess is what I'm saying, to have like the big giant colony. You guys, it's critical. You got to have it. And you guys got to feed them up ahead of time, where we, like I said earlier, we could throw 1-to-1 at them until September.
Yeah.
And I remember Bob Benny saying that time he likes to go into winter with smaller colonies, and it's because he can where he's at. And same here, I can go in with a nuke, no problem. If it's healthy, if it's a healthy nuke, it'll go through those freezes just fine. But because we will warm back up, and they'll be able to move over to their food, and we'll be right back into 60s. 2 weeks after a 15-degree morning, where we went 15 degrees for 3 days straight, it'll turn right around and come up. So our winter prep is that, I wouldn't say it's not that it's not critical. It's not distinguished, just like the seasons down here. We don't have such distinguished 4 seasons as you guys do. Same with the beekeeping. We almost don't have a distinguished winter prep outside of, like Bruce saying, getting our mites taken care of, make sure we got feed, and like he's part of prep is throwing that Hive Alive on, knowing you're getting a good supplement on them. But in the end, if Bruce misses that supplement at the 1st of November, but then gets it back on there in the 15th of December, ain't gonna hurt him. He's still gonna get a supplement on there. If you guys do that, it might be frozen for a month straight, and your bees die because they didn't have enough. So that's why I like how critical you guys have very compact seasons, which I love to have, but we have a lot more forgiving seasons because we're so spread out. That's what I was trying to say.
Yep. No, that's it. I mean, it's up here with how our seasons are. And I mean, we do have like those specific, I mean, we have a true winter. We have a true, I mean, for the most part, true spring. There's some times where we go from freezing to the next week we're in the 70s, and it's just like, boom, here you go. But we do have traditional 4 seasons up here. So you got to for it.
Down here,
swarming too, where you guys can control your swarming a lot easier when it comes to that spring, because before you know it, you'll be in that flow. Where us, we're trying to control this for 3-4 months straight. We're still fighting it. So it's such regional. It's regional. Sorry.
Yeah, we have swarms. Sometimes I've had some in January even. And Mike, I think you said the same thing. And if we use, lots of times we'll have like a little warm snap in January, believe it or not. It might be 70s and 80s on January 8th. And then it might be like this year we had snow January 21st. We had a big snowstorm roll through during January or whatever day that was. And so snow is not common here, but we do. It just goes from springtime type weather to cold weather by our standards. And it's just really kind of tough. But we do see here in Alabama, I'm sure you see it too, Mike, over there. Across the South, we see large clusters, like they start to build up. Honestly, I don't know. I think there's some red maple that blooms here maybe in January, and it's kind of game on. And so it gets dangerous because they'll build that population up, and then we'll have a little dearth or a cold snap or 3 weeks of rain, and then they'll starve because they may have plenty of weight in the colony. And then you have a couple of weeks where there's nothing coming in, or they just can't get out and forage. And you'll have a nice big colony that can get in trouble in a hurry that way. And so that's a little bit different. There's a lot of differences. And DC, I think I marked his comment here. He said, and this is so critical to realize, I think, see if I can find it here. Yeah. DC says, it took me a season to learn the difference between southern beekeeping videos and northern beekeeping videos. And that is so true. If you're a new beekeeper out there, it's just easy to get in that trap of watching a video of someone who's successful in one part of the country, trying to mimic that if you're in the other part of the country, and you can just absolutely get hammered. Not that the bee biology is different, but just the seasons, the local aspect of things is different. And so that's so critical. I'm glad we had John tonight, Mike, a guy from pretty far north, and then both of us down here in the South is just completely different. But there are a lot of positives to living here in the South, Mike. There's a lot of negatives as well.
That's right.
What would you say are some of the positives for living here in the South, Mike, in your opinion?
Oh wow! One of those is the forgiveness of mistakes. We have time to correct mistakes, and honestly, people may think we're not like in South Florida where we have flow over and over long periods of times. This, Bruce. We pretty much, you and I have two main flows, and that's it. They're probably 3 weeks apiece. If one of them doesn't come in, we're almost done. So it's not like we have this long flow, but so people think we have all that. So that's not necessarily an advantage. But one of the things that I think is we're, again, not as critical in the wintertime. Talking about feeding, I get on a soapbox about that all the time. And the videos that DC said, like, you see videos, and I see so many people down here that watch YouTube, and they go, all right, I got to start feeding now. It's a dearth. No, you actually don't, because our flow gets over in July. Slow down, bucko. What do you got going on? You got 75 pounds of honey sitting on top in that top double. If you're not a commercial beekeeper trying to build your colonies up, get ready for queen run, get ready for pollination in December, whatever it may be, no, you don't have to feed those bees. Slow down, bucko. Don't feed them up. Don't do just what you see on YouTube, because you're pouring. And like Brian mentioned it earlier, timing's everything. You plug that nest too early, you've just discouraged them from laying winter bees. So I see so much from YouTube and people seeing it. That's one of our advantages is if you just learn your area and learn what you're doing, the advantage of Southern beekeeping, one of them is that winter prep is we have more time, it's more forgiving, and we prep so much, we can prep so much cheaper if we choose to. Up north, they better feed. Like they better they better stack that colony full, and they better have that thing sitting at 75 pounds. I don't know, the book say 60, I say 75, and have it packed with, like in November, it better be packed, because they're gonna burn. They don't thaw out till March. So, like you said, we're getting warm in January. We're putting brood in February. That's another advantage. Is our prep is so much easier to prep for a 3-month winter. Now again, Bruce, good point. Got to be careful in February. That's when you starve them, believe it or not. But that's some of the advantages we have. Some of the disadvantages we have is that marathon swarm season. I mean, it's marathon where we're watching swarming from mid-February all the way through to June. And you can split a colony down mid-March in my area, and by mid-April, they'll be ready to swarm again. You have to split them back down and rob some more brood. And the whole adage of just add more space, that doesn't work. They'll hit that privet, and you'll put more space on them, and they'll swarm anyway. So that's a disadvantage. Is there's no compact season where we can say, okay, we split them. They're going to hit this flow in within 6 weeks. They're going to be done, and we're going to be treating and in a dearth, and then we're going to be in the fall flow, and then we're back in winter. We don't have that. So where we have the forgiveness, we also have a long drawn out swarm season. So that's my take on some of the advantages and disadvantages of being down here this far south.
Yeah, Mike, 21st B, Michael says hive beetles and half the season seems like swarm season, and that's true. Hive beetles is another issue that can be just a pain in the tail down here for us. But and when I hear people say that they don't have any issues with hive beetles, it's like I'm like, wow, that would be pretty cool. Brian, advantages to being up north. What can you tell us?
Advantages?
Yeah, you guys have some advantages up there.
We do. I tell people I don't necessarily hate the cold because it keeps the bees hunkered down and they're not moving as much. I would rather have it stay cold for 2-3 months, because your bees are going to stay hunkered down. They're not flying. They're not moving as much, so they're not burning through as much food. I did see somebody saying here about we don't have small hive beetles, and thank you, baby Jesus, we don't have to deal with those small hive beetles like you all do. So I've never to date I have never seen a slime out.
Yeah.
Oh man, you should come down here. I can show you one a few
Yeah,
days ago.
we could show you some. Although this year I haven't had too many slime outs, Mike. It's been kind of interesting. I've had some beetles. I've only had a couple of true slime outs so far that I've found, but I've had
Yeah,
several. When the hives actually die out, then the hive beetles kind of come in and they lay eggs in the pollen and the brood and stuff, or the pollen and the honey, and then you see them. You'll see the wax moth, the cleanup crews there, and there's a lot of larvae on the bottom board and stuff, and pollen on the bottom board. But as far as true slime outs, I haven't seen a lot of that. Brian, what about disadvantages up north? We've talked about some of those already, but what do you think?
I mean, the disadvantage, like Mike said, I mean, your seasons down south, they're a little bit more forgiving. You have a little bit more wiggle room. Up here, because we have true seasons, the 4 seasons in the year, you have to stay on top of things. And if you are late, then it ends up biting you in the rear, because what you do 1 month, that's going to have a trickle effect for months afterwards. So while an advantage is, hey, when you're up north, you can learn beekeeping in 4 seasons, you have to stay on top of it and ahead of it. If you're not a proactive beekeeper up here and you get into like a reactive, so to say, behavior, it ends up biting you in the rear every time, just because you're chasing your tail every single time you go in the yard. You have to plan ahead.
Yeah.
it seems like y'all season too. What I see with the northern guys is, say you're out there, right, and you got your season. It's so compact, like I say, and where I say that forgiving thing is, if I were to have a swarm naturally on the 1st of March or up into even the 15th of March, we always say, all right, our honey's gone. But really, and honestly, we could, if they requeen properly in that swarm, we could have a honey crop still off of them. We're up north, when you guys finally get roaring, by the time your bees are building the cells, if they swarm, you're done. It's finished.
Yeah.
That hive, you might as well put an X on that hive, let them requeen, hope for the best, or requeen, unless you buy a queen and go in and kill all the cells. And then you guys still might not even have a chance. I think you put an X on that hive, get them back healthy, and get them ready for winter, because where we can make a mistake in March, and now once it's April, it's done. If they swarm, we're done. But if we make a mistake in March, we can recoup. If I take too much brood from them in March, they can recoup by the second flow. Where you guys put the X on the hive, get them ready for winter, get the queen healthy.
Right.
Gary Stewart makes a comment here, and it's kind of true. He says small hive beetles don't directly hurt bees like mites do. In some extent, that's true. Like, they don't actually attach to the bees and inject viruses into the bees, but they will absolutely, if a hive is a little bit weak. They are opportunists. Like, it seems to me, Mike, I don't know if you'd agree with this, that even if I have a strong colony and I crack the lid, if I'm in a bee yard and I've got say 10 colonies, and I'm going through them, I'm not seeing hardly any beetles. The bees are looking good and everything. And then I crack a lid of even a strong colony. It's just got hundreds of beetles under the lid. To me, in my experience, that hive, for whatever reason, those beetles, to me, it feels like they sense a weak or a sick colony even before we can see it sometimes. And I'll come back a couple of weeks later sometimes, even if I try to squish those beetles, get them out of there, do whatever I can to try and get rid of them. Sometimes I come back and that hive is gone, or for whatever reason, maybe they had a high virus load, maybe they had a high mite load, but it seems like the beetles are opportunists. They can figure that out, and they absolutely drive the bees crazy if there's a lot of beetles. Like, they herd them everywhere, they keep them in corners, but the bees spend a lot of effort keeping those beetles under control. So I don't really worry about it. If I crack a lid and see some beetles, it's not that big of a deal. Or if I go to the bottom board, but man, you know how it is, Mike, when you open up a hive and they're just overrun with hundreds, if not thousands of beetles, there comes a point where the bees just can't control them anymore. And they'll lay eggs in the honey and the pollen, I guess. And they just, before you know it, you'll have it. That's when a slime out occurs. And so, but that is a true statement, Gary. They don't actually latch onto the bees and kill the bees, but they do. A lot of beetles in a colony is an indicator of something that you don't want to see.
Listen to this. So I did a timing thing. I had a timing lecture a while back, and it talks about the nurse bees and how much they're feeding and how much larvae they feed to the queens, how many visits they make to the larvae they're bringing into worker bees. If you take these bees and you've got hundreds of beetles that they're constantly corralling, and I know certain bees have certain roles and they're doing their thing. If they're being taken away from their brood rearing, you end up with a stressed colony. They're stressed,
For
first
sure.
of all. They're not producing. That queen's laying, but they're not feeding.
Yeah.
They're coming out with some very inferior bees. Strong colonies, and I say it all the time. I say it 100 times over. I believe in it. Strong colonies will not fail to beetles. But you bring up a super point, Bruce, is that if you open a strong colony and it's got bunches of beetles, something's wrong. It may look strong to us, but something's usually wrong, because then you turn around and you're taking all those resources away from raising that brood and from working that hive. The foragers are still going out, but those other bees are trying to corral those beetles. And before you know it, all those beetles are waiting on is one misstep. As Dr. Harris would say, one misstep, it's over. And
Yeah.
they've got, and you're right. When you see them with a bunch of beetles, something's usually wrong with that. They know. I don't know how they know, but they know.
Yeah, I think if you were to test a colony like that, I haven't really done this or tried to. I should try to do this. This year we're getting kind of towards the end of the season, but I should kind of keep my mite testing kit with me. And if I see a colony next year that is unusually loaded up with beetles compared to the other colonies, I should just do some mite washes and see if they have more mites than the other ones. That would be an interesting study to see
Yeah,
if that stress from the mites or the virus load is drawing them in. I feel like the beetles can sense a sick colony. That's just a feeling I have. I don't have data to back that up. I don't have studies to back. That's just kind of an opinion I have after watching and observing over the years. DC asked a question here, and my answer, he says, are there any diseases that are carried by small hive beetles? He asked that to all three of us. I personally don't know. I don't know. Now, there's a commercial beekeeper, an old timer here in Alabama, that is convinced the hive beetles are almost worse on bees than the mites are as far as diseases go. But I don't know if that's true. Brian, let's hear what you're saying.
He's got some news here.
They have been, and I forget who we had on. I don't know whether it was.
Yeah, it was on here.
Dr.
I remember
Peck.
that.
I don't know whether it was Dr. Peck. I don't know who it was, but said that they have been proven to carry viruses, deformed wing virus and different viruses like that. Now, as far as the transmission, you've got the mite that's latching onto the bee, so you get a direct transmission there. I don't know the transmission rate, when you compare, okay, you've got varroa mites that are, polluted with viruses, and then you've got small hive beetles with viruses. I don't know the difference, like how many small hive beetles with viruses it takes to make that colony unhealthy. I don't know all that information, but there is data out there that says they do carry those viruses.
Dr. Harris led on to something like that the other night, talking about the viruses and how, we were talking about mites, but he was talking about how close proximity all of our hives are. And he knows he was with commercial beekeepers, but he said all these years, really, we need to spread them out more. And he brought up something like that about other pests. And he didn't specify the hive beetle, but other pests being able to spread viruses between close proximity colonies, besides just drift.
Yeah, it shows. I mean, it
I
think it's something we think about. I don't know for sure, but I would not be surprised. I don't have any data or studies to back it up, but I do think so, that the beetles definitely create pressure on the bees. Some hives handle them just fine, others don't. I do have one location where there are six colonies, and they all have beetles in them. And so I'm always it's just in a kind of a sandy soil area it's in the shade. It's just not really an ideal location. Probably. Now the bees do well there, but they're always battling beetles. And so I just employ all the different, as a matter of fact, one of my most recent videos, I was at that bee yard and I explained some of the strategies I use. But I just plan on treating those for beetles every year and keep under control. But if all the hives have beetles in them, to me, that's not as much of an indication of a problem or a sick colony as it is when I go to a bee yard that has a bunch of colonies and just a couple of them are loaded up with beetles. Does that make sense? Because then, to me, if all the hives have them, then that's just a bad spot if they all have beetles in them. But if you go to a bee yard that's normally full of healthy colonies, and say you got 20 colonies, 2 of them are loaded up with beetles, then to me, there's something sick, some kind of virus problem. Maybe the queen, maybe something's failing about that colony. But those beetles, it seems to me like they can sense it. I don't know how they do it, but they can sense it. So anyway, that's kind of my opinion on the beetles.
Some kind of smell. Somebody
and
thinks
someone,
it's done by odor.
oh yeah, I've heard that beetles have an incredible sense of smell, almost even more so than the bees do. That they're really, really able to sniff out beehives from a long, long ways away. And that's one thing too. Like the beetles, they just fly right in. They don't have any problems getting into beehives, no matter where they're at. They find them because they can fly right in. And so it's pretty. They're pretty interesting. They're pretty tough little critters as well. It is kind of satisfying though, smashing them with a hive tool or whatever you can do, just smashing those jokers. I'm pretty good at that. I also don't mind when I have a dead out or I have a bunch of larvae on the bottom from a dead out. I don't mind getting a blowtorch to them and just kind of cooking them. That's kind of fun too. That sounds kind of evil and bad, but
it's got a
I will do
smell
that.
too.
What's that?
It's got a distinct smell too.
Ooh, yeah, it smells like burning hair or something like that. It's kind of strong smelling, but it does. It absolutely. And I feel like it's important to get rid of those larvae if you're in a situation like that. They look like little maggots writhing around on the bottom of the hive because all those larvae are potential beetles. And so if you can burn them or get rid of them, scrape them into a container, get them out of there, destroy those larvae, then I think you're ahead of the game as long instead of just leaving them alone, let them go ahead and reproduce. That's just my. Jew Driver says, Cayman says 500 points per beetle. Well, I'd have a lot of points then.
Ooh.
I kill a lot of beetles.
He couldn't pay that bill if he came down here.
Well, man, good stuff so far. We're an hour in.
Yeah.
I didn't know, golly, we've talked about some important things. Trying to think if there's anything else we really need to address. I'm sure there are a lot of things we could address. Maybe we could just, if anyone has any questions to throw in here real quick, throw them in, and maybe we can go through some questions real quick.
There's a couple in there.
Yeah, I've got the starred ones here. We'll just kind of start off. Eric, Spirit of Toad. He lives not far from me over in the Donaldsonville area, I believe. He says, last month the farmer's market's for me. Let's talk about winter bees. That's kind of what we've done tonight, Eric, and that question kind of got us going on it, so appreciate it. Well, what did I do there?
I clicked it probably the same time you did.
Okay. So Dustin Weed, I'm not sure how you say that. He says, I'm in Wisconsin. When's a good time to put Hive Alive fondant in? Brian, that's a better question for you up there. I don't know when you got to start putting that stuff in. Down here, really, I'm going to start putting it in probably. I'm going to kind of keep an eye on my colonies and see how they look. When it starts to get pretty chilly here, I'll start putting it in. Really, Mike, I know you'd agree with me on this probably. Even if it gets cold, if we're down in the 20s, for us, that's pretty cold here, 30s. We're never more than 3 or 4 or 5 days away from like a 60-degree day, 50, 60-degree day usually. And so even if that fondant freezes, they can still work at it, Brian, don't they? I think when it freezes because they're emitting warmth through the cluster.
Yeah.
When it cools down, they get up in there and I started putting there when it cools down. Last year I did 3 rounds, and I think it takes them typically 2 to 3 weeks to kind of go through it, and even if they eat it up, I don't put it on there every single week, even if they eat it up in a week. And so I did 3 rounds last year, and my bees came out of winter looking better than they ever have. So Brian, up north, when do you typically apply your Hive Alive fondant?
I've moved towards putting it on just after Thanksgiving. I put it on early, but what I have found that by doing so, the bees did not chew up as much of their stores. And then in the springtime, it seems like they have more food from their own foraging that they can just kind of go at it then as far as building up in the springtime. So Thanksgiving is kind of like that's been my mark in the last few years.
See, that's not all that different from me. Mike, I know you've utilized Hive Alive more as a preventative measure. Is that true, or have you used it on all your? Tell us kind of what your philosophy is with the fondant or winter feeding.
No, it's the same. It's what you said. I just do it in the situations on the light ones because I'm not going to put syrup on for it to freeze and then thaw, because then you get that drip in there, and I don't want my bees getting wet if it gets cold the next morning. And even like us, we can get into the 30s, and then we'll turn right around and be in the 60s, and then the 30s the next night on our cold days. So that really has the liquid dripping. So I'll put the fondant on light colonies only, just because it's an expense thing. But I thought about doing what you did and just going through them all. You and Brian both do that, and I'm thinking I'm gonna order some and do it. But it just depends. I like to just supplement those. I use it as an emergency feed because there is Hive Alive in it, but they get the best concentration of Hive Alive from the liquid feed itself. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier. I want to do like you do. I built a tote like you have with the pine straw and all in it, and I'm gonna do exactly what I saw in that yours, that yard under the trees where you and me and Greg just got tore up requeening.
Yeah.
But that yard, yeah, again, that's the yard. I want to mirror that with my feeders sitting 100 feet away and just load the Hive Alive on them, and then supplement only light colonies. But we'll see. I may order 2 or 3 more cases and do it anyway because I just believe in this stuff. I really do. I believe in Hive Alive. I believe what Dara's doing. I believe his research. So,
hey, if you just a little shameless plug here, if you put a code Bruce10 in there,
yeah,
you can get a discount.
yeah.
You may have your own code. I don't know, but I'm just
not yet. I never did apply for that, man. I don't know. There's so many people, but I might do it.
But I do believe in it. It just makes it takes away so much of the guesswork. And down here, Mike, honestly, what I've done in the past when I was trying to build bees up for pollination, which I'm not going to do that again this year. Who knows if I will in the future, but I would just put open feeding out. You can put it out in the wintertime too, because if it's too cold, they can't forage, they don't go to it. But if it's warm enough, they do. And so that's how I put weight on my colonies. And like down here, it's really forgiving. In November, December, you can put open feed out there.
Let me go back and qualify what I said. The reason, the reason I don't put it on everybody is one of the reasons that Brian said is I want my bees to eat through so much honey in the winter because there's nothing more I hate than going through hives in February and evaluating for the spring splits and everything and having top deeps wall to wall honey. I want them in that honey eating it. As much as I want the Hive Alive to be consumed, that's what I'm afraid of. So that's why I won't do what you do necessarily 3 rounds of it through the winter, but I will put 1 to get the supplement in them.
Sure.
You know, I'm thinking about that, but I need to eat that honey.
Mine typically, even if they're loaded with honey, they typically, when they start to brood up in the winter, man, they will just, golly, they just fill that top box up with brood. I mean, they just go crazy. They eat through it somehow, even with the fondant on there. Last year, they were set up for splits, even in mid-February. One thing that I don't know why I thought about this, but I just wanted to kind of describe to me, kind of backing up a little bit in the year, like say when you pull your honey supers off. Now, Brian, you run single deep management, but you do keep a medium super on there for winter food, which is a great idea. And I'm sure you want your colonies to look kind of like we want ours to look, just with the deep. Or I use deeps on most of mine, double deeps. I do have a medium box on some. Mike, going into winter, what is the configuration you want? I'm going to kind of describe, first of all, what I like mine to look like. And actually, this year when I pulled the honey off, the ones that were in double deeps were set up so perfectly for the upcoming dearth, and those that I left alone are looking really good right now. They're just looking beautiful. But pull the honey off. If they were in a double deep, stacked however many box, 3, 4, 5 boxes on top, whatever it was of honey we pulled, take the queen excluder off, start going through to apply Viroxan strips. And what we were finding was the perfect bottom with 4, 5, 6 frames of brood, honey on the outside. Top box had 2 or 3 frames of brood with a dome shape, honey on the top, and it was like a dome, front to back, side to side, just like this and like this. And the top rim was honey, obviously, right? But there was some brood working up into those center frames, pollen kind of on the outside of that dome. And then it was just beautiful. And so I love to see that because there's weight in them. I didn't have a real bad issue with the plugging out of the colonies with getting honeybound this year. I probably had a few that were that way, but I found that in most of my double deep colonies, that's what I found perfect. And going into winter, I like to see that too. The problem I had this year was I had got some queens in July to make splits, and so I split a lot of those colonies up. And those colonies they're doing, a lot of them are doing okay, but they had to kind of struggle because I had to break up that. I broke up that dome shape. I broke up that beautiful pattern in there to try and make splits. And it kind of created some issues. And then with Greg's queens, kind of the same thing. I had to break some of those up. So the ones I left alone are mostly looking beautiful. The ones that I messed with, I'm having to really work with trying to get them where I need them. But Mike, what is your perfect configuration? I guess, first of all, when you pull the honey supers off and then going into winter, what do you want to see? Like right now, what do you want to see as far as the way your bees are set up?
Pretty much what you just said. I'm gonna be a double deep. I'm big on double deeps because it's just easy. I don't have to fool with feeding them up into a single to make sure it's packed out, and I don't have to store a whole pile of brood comb in my deep. So I leave a second deep on them. I want to see exactly what you're seeing. When I pull them off, I like the top to be 70% honey and the bottom to be probably 30%. Opposite each box. And then I like to have them backfill what they can in the fall. And I want a nice heavy top box going into winter. I want double deep. So the configuration after honey flow, that's for me is July, August. I don't mind if the box is plugged all the way across, but I found exactly what you found. 2 to 4 frames of brood that were small patches of brood, say like this, with honey all around in the top, and then the bottom 4 or 5, maybe 6 frames of brood. So yeah, I want packed out top boxes.
I love that dome shape though. It's so beautiful when you find that.
Yeah, it's textbook, man. It's textbook, and you can see what people forget is honey is a thermal barrier too. It's not just food.
Oh yeah.
And so that thermal barrier, they're building that thing around them. They're building themselves up a nest, and so I mean, but yeah, I'm like you. I want to see that double deep. I want predominantly full double deep on top, and then what I was saying earlier is if they eat through a lot of that in the winter, February, they start loading that top with brood. I've got such a perfectly set up box splitting that I don't have to do anything but rip the top off and go on down the road.
That's right. Brian, with your, you say that once you kind of deal with honey, you take the queen excluder out, then you have a deep on the bottom, medium above that. Going into winter, do you find a similar type pattern? Do you normally see mostly is the brood all in the bottom box, or do you see some of it creeping up into that medium a little bit, like that dome shape?
They'll be up come, oh gosh, I mean it all varies, but I mean they'll end up when we're in spring, they're pretty much almost every bee is up in that medium. They move up throughout the winter,
right?
Yeah.
So, and then you need to, you need to get them back down. But I used to rotate my boxes. I would flip them just to get the queen back down right away, but they take care of it.
You know what? We used to do that all the time. We had a mentor that did it. I'm not disagreeing with it, but I've quit doing it because you're exactly right. I've told you you're right 3 or 4 times on this, Brian. So you owe me. But
I know.
No,
I didn't even have to pay him. I didn't even have to pay him to say that.
And you give me a hard time all the time. So it's one of those things where you are right. They will go back down. And I'm not so sure my brood production is better or worse when I flip the boxes, but they go back down. And me and Mr. talk about that all the time. And we were very big proponents of that. And we have both quit doing it because, first of all, he ain't going to do it because it's work. And me, I just don't see a benefit necessarily to it.
One thing I think about is if you find, and Brian and Greg or Mike, you've done a lot more cutouts than Brian or me, either one have. And I think when you open up a wall, don't the bees typically kind of move up and down in that wall on the comb? I know they build new comb every year, but they kind of go up and down. And so in nature, they do that. So why don't we do that? They do that in our boxes, you know?
You know who brought up this best point, and it was John. What's his name? I forget his last name. He's been a viewer of all of ours for a long time. Indiana. I can't remember his name. Just anyway, that we did that time where it was myths, and remember that video that everybody did of myths? Maybe it was y'all that had to send them in. And what's a myth?
Beekeeping myths.
Or honey. Yeah, something like that. Well,
that's what what's his name? Bohemia Bees. Jason did that. He did a video.
Okay, right. So John said this, and he made me think, man, because we always said bees are inclined to move up, right? And we're like, okay, hold on. Well, he said, how do they build comb? And in cutouts, this is what you see in cutouts. He said, how do they build comb? They build down.
Top down.
What do they do? That's right. And so when you put a box on them, they go up to build it, but they always build top down. If you put an empty frame in there, they build top down. Why do they move up? Because they put the food above them, right? And that's so they move up to survive. But what do they do when the food is gone? They move down and they start building brood in that bottom box and moving back up again. And so, are they inclined to move up? No, they have to survive, so they move up. And I thought that was, I learned so much from that when he said that. I was like, wow.
They always want the honey up top, and so
That's right.
It seems like they eat up, and then when the brood starts, usually to me it seems like when the nectar flow starts, they start making more brood when nectar and pollen comes in, especially pollen. And when they do that, then they put the honey up, then they start moving back down. They put brood, so they just kind of go up and down, whatever the season
they're going to put the
entails.
honey up top, and they're going to stay brooding in the bottom. So what happens when they start? So go back to the double deep, and we got 2 full brood boxes, right? You and I, we don't run singles, and we have these 2 full brood boxes going into the flow. We put those supers on top because what? They're going to store honey. But what do? They'll store that thing, and they will finally go down to that second deep, and they will fill that all the way up and push her right back down. So
that's right.
Are they
exactly.
to move up? No, they're not. They're inclined to be down in the bottom making brood, storing stores up top.
Great question. And I think we've been talking about that a little bit from Uncle 60s is why do bees go up in the winters? Because the heat goes up. That might be something to do with it, but it's more the food, I think. Wouldn't you agree with that, guys? More the food. Yeah. That's where the food is.
They have to survive on food.
I read before, and it's been years, so I mean, the information, it might not be true. I might be wrong, but I read before that bees, when they start down in that lower box, they move up an inch a week. So if you look at, and that was by a double deep. So that clusters down below. If you're looking at like a 12-week, say, winter, you figure they've gone up about a foot. And I mean,
it's right. And they go up to expand their nest is what they're doing. And expand your nest isn't an inclination to move up. It's called, well, we got to expand our nest and we got to eat. And where they put the food, right?
Yeah. And I have had some bees, I know you guys probably have too, that like they'll move up and then they just don't want to move down. Like it's weird because sometimes I pulled honey supers off before and all the brood, it'll be a double deep and they've got all the brood in the second box and they never did move down. And the honey supers are packed. So every once in a while you get a hive that's pretty a little bit weird about it. But most of the time they just drop down when the winter comes, when the winter starts to dissipate and the spring moves in, they got to have room. They just push her down. She lays in that bottom box. It just, if you just leave them alone, lots of times, if you let them do what they do, they just do exactly what you hope they do. They don't always do that, but many times they just work it out and they figure it out. I know a lot of people are really, strong proponents of the single deep breed management, and that's fine. It just, the double deeps for me is so much more forgiving. But Brian, you kind of have a what's the word? I'm kind of hybrid type system because you do have that second box on there where you allow that queen to go up. There's some. Yeah. So once you get the honey off, and I do run some single deeps like on my splits. This year I had those splits I made early, and they built up into a nice strong single. And it was about time for the honey flow to kick in. So I slapped the queen excluder on there, and some of those things filled up 4 or 5 boxes of honey. And then the problem you run into, though, at the end of that is that you got a bottom box full of brood, and you pull the honey off, and then there's no food. And so then you got to figure out how to manage that. And sometimes they got a little bit of food in that bottom box too, or some, I don't know. You just kind of figure it out, and you got to learn how to judge and how to customize each hive individually. But that's one challenge that we have with that, because when we pull our honey off, the honey flow is basically over. So then you got to feed them, or you got to figure out something to do. Or you could even pull a box. Maybe you could pull a couple of frames of food over, but you got to play with it. So, man, great stuff, guys. We've already been going for an hour and 21 minutes. Do you mind if we kind of rapid fire through some questions and comments here real quick, guys, and see what we got? I know I probably missed some questions for those in the comments. If we did, I apologize. We're going to try and see if we can hit some questions here. Let's see. Yeah, you talked about around Thanksgiving time on the phone. Let's get rid of that question. Let's see.
There was one on all caps about swarm boxes and treating in the swarm boxes, I thought.
Yeah, I think I got that one. I down a little ways. But Mike, you may have answered this question already. Are you coming to the LBA field day?
I answered him a text. No, I can't make it this year. I want to so bad. It's such a great event at the USDA lab.
All right. Let's see. This is from DC. He says, I forget who it was, but I watched a beekeeper video the bees' reaction to oxalic acid when it was vaporized them in an observation hive, they really didn't seem to care much at all.
Spread them.
That is true. I mean, when I do oxalic acid vapor on my bees, it's like it doesn't even affect them hardly. If you go back in afterwards, like a few minutes afterwards, it's almost like they're more calm. I'm not sure if they're trying to clean each other or if it almost drugs them a little bit. But in many cases, the bees to me seem like it actually calms them down a little bit. It does really well. So has that been you guys' experience as well?
Yeah, they don't have any problem. I mean, some of them at first will fly out because they got covered in hot vapor, but
That's just when they're flying around, you got white bees flying around.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's true.
But the rest of them are always calm. They don't care. Don't seem like it.
Yeah, some of the more feisty colonies will get after you a little bit, but once it takes effect, once they go right back to within 10 minutes, you would never know you even treated them. Brian, I appreciate the super chat. That means a lot. That really helps. That helps motivate all of us. I think when we get these to keep doing these videos, it helps tremendously, and folks don't realize how much that helps. Let's see.
Yeah.
Paul says fall is quite different for Brian/Greg, and then Bruce, Mike, and me. And so that's true. It's just totally different. That's why it's super important. I think you guys would agree to find someone in your local area. And it's important. I learn things from people all over the world when I watch beekeeping videos, but really to be able to, like Mike and I, we'll call back and forth sometimes and we'll talk about, hey, what are you seeing? Because we're on a very similar latitude. We're off a little bit on timing, but we're seeing a lot of the same things, same time of the year. We have the same forage for the bees. And so Mike and I, we actually talk quite a bit. We're a few hundred miles apart, but very similar latitude and similar plants. And so that's important to have someone locally or in a similar situation as you to be able to discuss it with. It's important it's good if you're up north, Brian, like to watch me and Mike's channel, or if I'm down here to watch Ian's channel or you guys' channel. But really to zero in on our particular climate here, it's important to also be in touch with local people and people that are more like what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, when you're going through these last few questions, I'm probably going to jump here in a couple minutes. So
okay, yeah, we're just about there. Let's see. Yeah, we talked about this a little bit. Michael, 21st Bee says our threat is that if it doesn't stay good and cold long enough, they'll fly and consume too much food with our screwy 60 degrees days in the dead of winter. We deal with the same thing down here, Mike. If it gets warm too much, the colder winters actually the bees almost seem to do better, in my opinion. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Yes, 100%. When it freezes and we got long winters and we got good cold days, more than not, my bees come into, and so does the flora. The flora does good too. Everything seems to just have new life, way better.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. This is somebody, Mike, appreciate your approach right here. This is from Chance Neal. He says, Mike, Barry, your way of beekeeping should be everyone, not how to, just what I do. And that's so true. Yep. And I've even borrowed that quote a few times, but I try to always give you credit. I know one time I didn't, and I should have. So, but it's just so true. And I'm about to start doing some more educational type videos, but I still need to figure out a way to clarify that these are some basics and principles. But once again, you have to kind of figure out your own thing. It's just kind of my opinion on these things, and so that's important.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of follow-up questions here. We've got Carol McCarthy Loxton says, we have 6 bee yards and noticed bees in a swarm box a month ago. Was going to just leave them, but did not think about mites. Should I take them down and treat them? And then she does a follow-up question here where she says, guess I need to clarify my question. I have a few swarms in boxes. I treat my bees in boxes. What should I do with the ones in the trees? Treat, leave alone, nuke, or dump out? So I guess the question is, what do you do with bees in swarm boxes this time of the year? If they're still in the swarm boxes up in the trees. Mike, what would you do?
I treat them this year. I did that, although it didn't help one of them, I don't think. But well, she's already got brood in them now. But I started when I would catch it. I was more because I'm retired now. I was more. I was better about checking them faster, and so I would go in and treat them before they had any brood. But now, yeah, I would treat them if she's into treating bees. Why not? I mean, survivor bees and all that, they're out there. About 10% in the woods are survivor bees. It's what the data says from the USDA Bee Lab, but I don't know. If you're a treat person, it wouldn't hurt them, but
Yeah. I agree. I think you just take them off the tree, treat them, and stick them back up there, or you
Stick
could
them
go
back
ahead and
up.
set them in your bee yard somewhere if you wanted to.
And I had oxalic acid paper, so that was easy enough just to stick it in there while I was standing there, treat them, and walk away. And I did it twice. So. But I did the other couple with the no brood, so hope that worked.
All right, we've just got a little bit more to go here. Sam Mixon says this is just Sam's a good fan of the good supporter of the Stream Team and all of our channels. Do you have any single hives of bees that you are going to overwinter this year?
Yes, absolutely. The ones that
Yeah.
were behind or late splits, I go ahead and try and pull honey off of them like you did with yours, and then I'll feed them back. So all my singles I'll pretty much have to feed, and absolutely I love a single coming out of winter because all I got to do is stack boxes on those split, no nothing, stack boxes and work toward honey flow. Yeah, I will.
Yeah, I've got some too on the late summer splits. I go into winter with single deeps, double deeps, singles, and mediums, and then I also have I think one or a couple of nuke boxes that have some bees in them right now. Just kind of and I just kind of keep an eye on them, and we just feed them as we need to, and just treat them like everything else. But lots of times these singles they'll build a nice if they're a smaller colony, they'll just go ahead and build that little dome shape in the single box, and it works out good.
Yeah, I knew that SDWT couldn't leave. I almost put it on here. I knew it wasn't going to get away from it. When I came on the stream team, I knew the silver diamond white trash, Mike Berry, was coming up.
Well, is he talking about Brian Lee here?
Yeah,
Brian, here it
Brian,
is, right here.
A couple of them. Yeah, Brian Lee. And I got his hat too. I wear his hat, by the way.
Yeah, Brian made me these hats right here.
Yeah,
he made me these. Yeah. So but anyway, yeah. Brian made an appearance. We appreciate you, Brian. Brian is a great supporter of the channel and of the stream team, and we appreciate everything, all the participation. He's become a real close friend of mine. He's here in Alabama, and he's just a great guy. Appreciate the super chat from Brian. Also, Uncle 69.99 coffee money. Thanks so much, Uncle 60. We really appreciate that. And we've got Lisa, of course. Thanks so much, Lisa, for the $9.99 super chat. Stream team, hashtag stream team. Thanks so much. And we've got Bees in the Abyss, Kevin. Thanks so much for the $10 super sticker. Appreciate you guys. Thanks everyone for being on here tonight. Brian, I know you got to get back to your family here. Can you go ahead and tell us what's going on in your neck of the woods these upcoming few days?
Yeah. I tell you, pretty much I'm going to be treating them, monitoring their weight. If I see that they're starting to rip through their honey stores that they have on, then I'm going to throw buckets on them. You know, I've got everything prepped and ready sitting over there for that. So I'll just keep an eye on them. My OAV, like you guys will do once a week. I like to do every 5 days. I think that's what Cameron Jack said.
That's what I do. I do every 5.
Yeah, every 5 days I'll go over, and I typically do at least 5. So I'll pretty much the entire month of October will be OAV. And it's just, I mean, get things set for the winter. That's about it right now. Treat them, make sure they got weight. The colonies, other than that one, they're all good size. So they're looking good. And when I went through and there were a couple of them that had cells like the ending of like August and things like that I just wanted to check. And I pulled up a couple frames, and I mean, there were good slabs of brood in there right now. And I thought, can't argue with that. So, but yeah, my next time over, it's just, you know, I'll start my OAV and try and extract those last couple boxes. I'm going to try and get that done in the next week, and then haul all my equipment outside and let the bees clean it up. So, and just get the room cleaned up. That's about it. So, and call 2025 a season in the books.
Oh, I'm going to actually, so shameless plug here. And I hope to see Brian Lee on the way up, and maybe even Yappy, but I got conferences coming up. So I'm going to Virginia to speak the end of October. So any Virginia folks out there, I hope they'll come. It's in Whiteville, Virginia. That's what I'm doing. And then I'm going to be at the Mississippi Beekeepers Convention helping out John from Hillco like I did last year. That's going to be a good time. And then Waco, Texas, I'm helping them out again there, but also possibility in Waco that I might be speaking. I don't know. I talked to a guy today. Might be speaking there as well. So been having a good time doing that. I got to speak at the Louisiana Beekeepers Convention. And I'm going to tell you what, that's fun stuff, man. I really have enjoyed it. As nervous as I get before I go up there, like I'm a nervous wreck. But it's been a good time. So, but other than that, bee-wise, I'm doing what you did. I got my honey house finally cleaned up, got my bottler, my easy fill all hooked up now. I've got all the honey put away in buckets and going to drums next year, man. And I saw that
Oh,
post
wow.
that Josh made.
Now we know you're going big time going to drums.
No, I'm just making room. I'm out of room, Bruce. I
Yeah,
am not
man.
increasing. But yeah, so other than that, man, the bees are set for me. I don't do a lot in the fall. If they're heavy, like I tell you, I'll feed them if they're light. We'll go with some fondant soon. They're done. I did all my assessments. So just, hey, getting ready for winter, man. Looking forward to next year already, I suppose.
That's great. And well, here in Alabama, here in Southeast Alabama, I've talked about a little bit what I've been doing, but this past weekend I forgot to mention I just went crazy with the beeswax. I processed my beeswax. I bought a 25-gallon melter from Thorn Beekeeping, from Thorn Manufacturing last year, and I've gotten it pretty good with that. But here's some of the candles I've been working on. I got the little bears, and I got the little pillar ones, and they've turned out just beautiful. I figured out I just can't stand beeswax that's not perfectly clean and that doesn't have that beautiful smell to it, And I've been like crock pot. Sometimes they'll get too hot. Just finally figured out. Yeah, for those who don't know what that is, Brian's working on a mold for me. Maybe we're going to try and do some peanuts. Dothan is the peanut capital of the world, so we're going to see if we can make some peanut candles for local people here if they want to get those. He's working with me on that. But anyway, so
I've ever seen.
Yeah. So anyway, I've been working on that. It's been a lot of fun, and those pillar candles are just beautiful. I burned one of them. They're the Man Lake pillar candles with the hexagonal shapes on them, the honeycomb shape on them, and it burned almost 35 hours. It's 6 inches tall. The beeswax blows me away how long it burns.
They say they're a 30 to 40 hour candle, and I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, 34 hours and about 45 minutes. Yeah. So it was right in the middle of that. But so what we're doing here, I'm still trying to, and I've got quite a few people interested in them. I've already sent 4 out to Utah. I've sold a couple personally. And another lady while we were on here, she wants 4 more. And I've got a store that wants some. So I've only got 1 mold of each, the bears and the tall ones. And so I'm just constantly pouring candles, but that's been really fun. That's something I've never really tried to do before. And I've been so frustrated doing the wax, but now with the thorn wax melter, I've finally got it figured out to where it's working good. I'm keeping the wax clean without too much stress. It's been really cool. And but coming up, just treating for mites using OAV. I would like to treat every 5 days, but I think Cameron said every 5 to 7 days, and so I'm trying to do it once a week. Sometimes that's 6 days, some day it's 7, maybe even 8. But I'm just trying to do it, and I'll do it for probably 5 to 6 weeks in a row. Now that I've got my 3 vaporizers and I've got my stash of batteries, I've spent the money. Now I need to just make sure I use the machines, and so that's what's coming up. Not going to be.
I think you're going to be pleased with those results, Bruce. I really do.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I hope so. I hope it knocks them back. I know we still have a lot of brood. I hope we have a lot of brood. So that's my issue. So many people say you can't treat when there's brood. It's not effective. But if you do it enough, it does. My experience has been it does seem to knock them down. But you have to just hit them over and over again. You can't just hit them once or twice and expect it to do the job like you can when they're broodless. But
that's we never go. Time on. You hit it twice and it was useless for me. I hit it 3 times.
We never go broodless completely down here in the South, as you know, Mike, ever. So, but it's just a matter of we're kind of in that fall, preparing for winter, just test, check and wait, treating for mites, just bottling honey and selling honey. And now I'm doing more with the wax. And so just kind of in that holding pattern, trying to get everything cleaned up. I get my bee yards cleaned up. I've got some more space now. My brother moved some of his stuff out of the barn and moved it to a new location up there. So I've got that entire section, Mac, you've seen of the barn there. Three sections there. So I need to get that straightened out. It just in the summertime, everything gets kind of out of whack up there. So I got plenty of work to do, but not as much bee work. I may check on a few hives here or there just for fun, but really as far as going through them and bee work, there's just not a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what's going on here. As far as the channel goes, just be patient with me. I'm trying to, I mentioned this earlier, trying to kind of clean up my channel, trying to figure out a little bit of a different strategy moving forward. But I hope it works out. We'll see. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I felt this tug at my heart. I need to do something a little bit different. I don't know what exactly that means, but I do have some ideas. And so if anyone in here has any ideas of what they'd like to see on the channel, just put some comments on my channel, some of my videos, let me know. I do appreciate all the support, but there's something I got to do different. I'm just missing something right now and I'm trying to figure that out. But anyway, guys, we appreciate you being on here tonight. Brian, thanks for sticking out the whole time. I know you need to get back to your family. You got some things you got to take care of there. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. We don't have Greg on here because Greg is really good with saying things, but I'm going to try to not butcher it too bad. We just would encourage everyone. We really appreciate you being here tonight, guys. And I'm sure most of you probably know Mike. If you don't, go check him out at Mite Berry Bees or Mite Berry on YouTube. He has a great channel. And but we just encourage everyone just to do the best you can to be a good person, to influence everyone around you for positive, for good. Let's build each other up. Let's not be negative. Let's be friendly. There's plenty of hate and evil and bad going on in the world. Let's just don't be a part of that. Whether it be beekeeping, politics, or religion, or whatever the topic, let's try to be the peacemakers out there. That would be my charge for all of us, to try and do that. We are human. Sometimes we get a little bit, I get a little bit flustered and fired up sometimes, but it's best just to try and be peacemakers out there. And yeah, so as Greg says, we'd like for everyone to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. Thanks for watching. Let's see if I can figure out how to turn this thing off.
I got it.